Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
You are watching a Fact TV presentation of the BFUHS School Board Meeting.
Monday, it's 6 p.m. October 11th. We're having a meeting at the Bells Falls Junior High School for the Bells Falls Junior High School School Board. I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. And first up, by the lead. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Right, if we could, like to do some introductions if we could. Go ahead, Deb.
There's somebody.
David Clark, could I have you start? What is that?
Okay, I'm David Clark, I represent Westminster on the Union High School Board. Rob Welch representing Rockingham.
Tanya Noyes, I represent Athens. June Streeter, I represent Westminster.
Jason Terry representing Rockland.
Trevor Wright representing Rockingham. Thurston Sprague representing Grafton. Jamie Starrow representing Westminster. Kelly O'Ryan, Princeton.
I'm Staff Trucking representing Rockingham. And do we have anyone on Zoom, maybe? I don't see. I don't see any board. Okay. Heather, could I ask you to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Heather Warriors, the work-based learning counselor for work-based learning program coordinator for Wyndham Northeast.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
Do we have any adjustments to the agenda? Yeah.
I'm wondering if we could possibly move item 8A to follow communication and public comment. 8A is appointment of Rockingham representative to BFUHS board.
So would that be 5A then, call it?
I think that 5A would be an appropriate place to park it.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, June.
We're supposed to approve the September 19th minutes as well that were set on hold for
That were
last meeting.
tabled.
Yeah,
Said they weren't included in the packet. Do you guys want to hold off or do you guys want to just put them in there?
We had it last meeting, so
Okay.
we all received it.
I would love to
Yeah.
get them done. That would be awesome.
And the July 18th ones.
So those were
Yeah.
finalized today. What happened with those was it was a miscommunication on say my part. Tara would take some notes, wasn't there, and then by the time we realized that Darcy and Nicole have been working hard researching and coming up with notes. So Nicole sent them to us at about 10-15 minutes ago,
Yeah.
so they'll be in the next meeting, so
Okay.
I apologize for that.
And that's July what?
18.
Like,
yeah, they're in our inbox.
okay. All right, moving on to communication and public comment. Do we have anybody in the audience? Seeing none, do we have anybody out in Zoom land? Seeing none, okay. I'd like to move on to 5A, appointment of Rockingham representative to the Bells Falls Junior High School Board, action needed. We get a motion. David,
I move that we appoint Mike Stack to fill his vacant seat on Rock board. And I will take note that it's my understanding that the Rockingham board itself voted to send his name forward to this board here.
correct. And I wish Priscilla was here to speak on that, but that is what happened, and that's where we're at. Any discussion on the matter? But
And no matter what the term was originally, it's only for the end of, until March
yeah,
meeting, right?
yeah, so he has to, Mr. Stack has to run again if he so chooses.
Right.
All right, let's do a roll call. David?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Darcy?
Yeah.
Jane?
Yes.
Okay, and welcome aboard, Mike.
Thank you. Could I just say one thing? I just want to thank the community. Many members of the community reached out to me and encouraged me to come back onto the board and to complete the work that we've started on in the listening tours, and specifically in the financial area. So I just want to say thank you to the community for reaching out. Many times you have no idea if you're making an impact or not, and I got a very solid indication that folks in the community felt like I was, and that had a lot to do with why I came back.
Thank you.
I only have to say, please speak up, the machines are making more noise than, although the camera and the owls might pick up the voice, we're not getting it
Thank you. Thanks for saying it.
end to end.
David?
It's a point of order, and I think Deb might have the answer. Does Mike need to be sworn again, Deb?
Yes, you need to get sworn in again at the clerk's office.
I'll be in town hall tomorrow, so I'll take care of that.
And that would affect his ability to cast a vote tonight.
It would.
Leave.
So, Mike, no vote for Mike.
And we also need the reappointment to the, or David, was that part of your motion? I'm sorry, for the,
For only you.
yeah, I missed that. Hearing.
Okay. All right, moving on to review and approve board minutes for September 25th and September 19th. Anybody like to make a motion? Thank you. So, with everyone here, I don't think we need to do roll call, since nobody's on Zoom. All those in favor, this aye?
Aye.
Speeding things up. Reports, so these are, no, some of these are gonna be no action. So first up, we have, Heather Warriors joining us, which is gonna speak to us about, work-based program and all the wonderful things that she does, and welcome Heather, and come on up.
All right, thanks. Just gonna pass this around. I brought you all goodies. You can take them or not take them if you don't want to. I'll explain later. So there's bracelets, these are stickers, and then one of this is what I'm speaking to.
Thank you.
Before I stand, or can I kind of see that? All right, thanks.
That's all that.
So I just created a kind of basic, like, what's happening so far in the world of work-based learning this year. I wasn't sure if you were looking for exact information or not, and I'm happy to take questions after, and if I can answer them on the spot, fantastic. If I can't, I can get back to you, if that sounds fair. So what I passed around was just kind of a reminder of what the work-based learning program is. And we work through the flexible pathways to help our students have experiences that they might not have inside the classroom or in their community themselves, like within their home, those that they know, kind of seeing the world in a greater lens. And I'd like to draw your attention on the opening paragraph to the last sentence. For many, understanding the why do I need to know this provides motivation for more learning. So last year, that was kind of what I built my conversations around students with, and I found that work-based learning opportunities forges a connection between real life and academic life for our students. So a lot of I would get a lot of students like, can you get me working somewhere because I can't stand this class, or I don't want to be in the building or whatever. having that discussion as to why you needed to be here and the skills that we're really working on are for real life, that everyone's job in this building is to prepare you for life after. That's everyone's goal and everyone's job is kind of that impetus of all of my conversations with students. So I shorten that to what's your why? So you'll see that on all of the swag I have for you. I'm going to be working more with our middle school students this year. I started that in the spring with their 8th graders, and it was amazing. The first couple of weeks here, how the 9th grade students that I worked weekly with kept coming to me for questions, advice, even just where to go to, but I was like a safe space that they knew. And they were really engaged about creating their schedule as a freshman, fall of their freshman year, to look at where they might want to be, where they can kind of envision themselves. So what's your why is kind of like how I get the students in the door. So that's my new motto this year. You're going to see it everywhere. And I really feel like that conversation, we learn about work, through work, and then for work through the work-based learning program. So that's kind of the basis of it. You can see at the bottom of this page, little arrow, that conversation then leads to, sometimes that's it, just a conversation with me and in connection with their guidance team as to the best route they should take for classes. But a lot of times it leads to students performing an informational interview where they interview professionals in a career that might be of interest to them, because it's not abnormal for them to come in with like 7 things that they would love to do or nothing they would love to do. And then we have to kind of pick their interests and go from there. So that can be a quick phone call, a Zoom, in person. And then the job shadow or shadows, I found a lot of the students are going on multiple job shadows. And then an internship opportunity for many of them where they're working during the school day and they're earning credits. Transferable skills, they're earning credits in that way. So on the, before I get to the data so far, and we've only had 27 days of school, so this data isn't like, you know, all consuming, but the data is on the back side. But before I get there, are there any questions about just that piece? No, great. So you can see, I don't need to read this all to you, but I'm working a lot with students one-on-one this year, which I think is because they now know about this program from having it be, you know, a full-time position last year. So I thank the board and our district board for supporting that. Students, one of the highlights I have done here is that students are self-referring this year. So they're coming in and asking if they can work with me, which is amazing. So that's been great. So I have 9 students already out working every day in an internship, 4 more, 1 today we just found out is happening. So 4 more are in progress. So we're waiting for one piece or another to connect the dots before I can say like they're officially doing so. A handful of students have already done job shadows, a few more are scheduled for this month. And a couple of them are like looking forward to the next month, what they can do for a job shadow. Those are mostly juniors. So that's pretty cool that they're starting already. So they can think about their scheduling for spring and next fall, you know, before they really get to that, it's time to think about life after school. And then in that, you know, the first 27 days, we've engaged with 18 companies locally that have worked with our students in one capacity or another. So an informational interview, a job shadow, and internships, one of those things. So 18 different companies, which I think for a month of school is amazing. As our community is so supportive of these students. We have a few fun events going on. Last Friday was manufacturing day. So I took a small group of interested students to Chromec Technologies, and I think they were, they made it a really fun day. Mike and I toured 2 weeks prior to that. We didn't get to do any of the fun games they had. They were really great with our students. And it was, I asked the science teachers to identify students who might be of interest, who maybe wouldn't have ever thought that they could work for a large company like that. And they made it really fun for these kids, like made it relatable to them, but blew their mind at the same time. It was really cool. So it was a great day. That was a lot of fun, and they invited us to come back with another group. So I hope to continue that a few times. Next week, all juniors are going to Leland and Gray for a reality fair, which is sponsored by Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. I work pretty closely with them. They're paying for the transportation and all of it. And the first part of our morning there will be financial literacy class. So students prior to going will receive a budget based on the, you know, the job that they like spun the wheel and get, and then they get to choose while they're there. They're going to speak to landlords, they'll speak to car sales folks, they'll speak to insurance agents, all of the things that is the reality. And they'll go around and sign up, and maybe they would make a different choice for what car they think they can afford in the first year of work or whatnot. Maybe they'll look for a roommate by the end of the day. I don't know, but that's the reality part of the financial literacy part. And I hope that it encourages more students to sign up for financial classes here. And the second part of that morning is adulting 101, and they'll learn how to change a tire and safe electrical in a house, like, you don't like the extension cords in 2 to 3, all of that. There's a first aid, the EMTs will be there with some hands-on first aid for them. Jeannie Hudson, who is our health science teacher at the tech center in Brattleboro, does an amazing, I don't want to spoil it in case any of the kids are listening, but babies and diapers, hands-on. So it's really cool. It's a little bit of everything that would actually happen in your day-to-day life. And part of that is like they spin the wheel of fortune or misfortune, and it might be like, this week my washing machine died and I have to replace that, or I get an unexpected bonus at work. So then it's like, oh, but I have to pay out 200 and you got 200. And so it's a fun way to introduce them to thinking about life after high school. So we're starting that with juniors this year in hopes that last year I brought seniors. So juniors, in hopes that we can replicate something like that with our seniors here. So we won't have the class missing out, but that it's not like, I've already know what I want to do. I've already applied here. I'm going to work here, get them thinking a little bit prior to that. So that's next week. Our own Fearless Future Summit here, I still intend to do in the spring. PCB, we'll see where that lands, but we will work on alternate sites. If not, I'm not gonna not have that. And then also our students were featured in a documentary on the future of Vermont by, it's called To the Moon Productions, last spring at our Fearless Future Summit. So that will be coming out soon. That's very exciting, and I cannot wait to hear what they had to say. So that will be cool. And I'm working with all of our 7th and 8th grade students. I know that doesn't really pertain to you necessarily, but it does in the idea that when they come here, they will already have been working with me for a couple of years. So I met with the crew down there last week, and I start work with them next month. So that's very exciting. Highlights you can see here again. I don't want to read to you, but I wish you could see some of our students when they, either the pictures I receive or when they come back after a job shadow and they're beaming like, I loved it. It was so cool. Did you know that this happens there? And just, it's really rewarding. And it is so motivating for our students to go out into the community and experience, first of all, being treated like a colleague or an adult. That's very different for a lot of them in the first place. And then like asking questions and having all of their their questions answered that they're formulating in their minds that I don't know what every career is like. I don't know, but I know someone who would, and I connect them with that person. And it's really cool to listen to them come back. Conversely, I've also had a couple of students already say, this is not what I thought it would be. And that is equally successful, because now we're not going to waste a bunch of time and energy. And if that required a degree, $100,000 for you to pursue something that you don't love, right? So what drew you to that in the first place? Maybe there's something similar, and kind of affords us the opportunity to work more with the students in that way. So that's been cool. And as always, our teachers here are very flexible and supportive. It's a lot when I send an email like, next Tuesday, so-and-so's out for the day, next Thursday, so-and-so's out for their job shadow, and I have yet to have a teacher say. Sometimes, they might say, oh, we have a huge test that day, and okay, we'll flip the day. But they've never said, like, the student can't miss. Even if the student is struggling in that class, the teachers are well aware, like, I will work with them because this is important for them for life after here. So I appreciate all of our staff in that manner. And then I just shared with you some goals. I still would like to have the internships set up prior to the semester starting, when the schedule changes. So like this summer, I worked with a few students, but I couldn't get them all in here before school started. So there's a few days where they don't have their internship set up. So like now I'd like to start in December for January when we switch schedules, all of that. So that's my personal goal. And I'd like to fine tune a parent and student survey to see if I can make the program more accessible, or just to hear some feedback. And I have one, but I'd like to fine tune it. And I'd love to increase the number of students who are engaged in informational interviews, because they all want to jump right to a job shadow, which is really cool, but if they're they have 10 ideas, they don't need to miss that much school. So I'd like to increase that number. And I would love to do more hands-on work on resume writing, mock interviews, things like that, preparing our students, especially our seniors in the spring before they leave. So I could go on for hours. I have pages and pages. I mentioned we had 18 companies already working with our students to date after just a month. They've been 27 days that our students without timesheets for this week have worked 560 hours. So that's almost 5 credit hours. That's over all of the students. But the students engage in an internship. That's like a half a credit already that they've earned. So it's an elective credit that they've earned through transferable skills, but they not only have to go to work, in whatever capacity they need, they have to check in with me weekly, have timesheets signed by a supervisor. And we just have a weekly check-in, which is really quick, but it's on their skills and their growth, not so much what they're learning on the job. That's really important to them. I'm more concerned about their growth, their communication skills, all of those transferable skills that when we look at like the PPGRs, what, the path that looks like for them. That's where my focus is. And for some students, that's to balance their schedule, to be here, even though it's 5 or 10 minutes, to come in to meet with me and to have their timesheets shared with a supervisor and me. That really is a skill that is a challenge for a lot of our students. So I'm super proud that we already have that many hours accounted for. Other questions? Because again,
Anybody have any questions for Ed? Go ahead, David.
Thanks, Heather. I've actually got 2.
Okay.
And the first question is, how does the interface work between middle school and high school?
Between the two schools?
Well, you made a very interesting comment in your introductory remarks when you referred to WNESU.
Yes.
And I'm uncertain at this point as to whether you are a full-time employee of the high school, or whether middle school is picking up some of your salary, which certainly if you're providing services down there, would seem to me to be a reasonable expectation on the part of this board. So I guess the first part of the question is, you're working with middle school students. How does that fit together with the work that you're doing up here? I presume that when you engage a kid in middle school, then it's, smooths the path to the work that you and that individual will be doing here.
Correct. So 2 questions, 2 answers, and Andy, I guess will correct me if I'm not correct. I believe that for this year, this will be the last year that this position is funded as an ESSER grant through the district. So WNSU total,
Okay.
So not out of the high school budget. Where it will land next year, that is apparently up to everyone but me. So I don't know.
Okay.
But for this year, I believe it's
Okay.
grant funded. Through the district, Vermont statutes state that students in grades 7 through 12 should receive work-based learning opportunities. Last year, my work at the middle school was only in the spring. It really took me a while to kind of get my bearings and what would work best, and I didn't want to waste anybody's time, students, staff at all, because I am pulling my full classes when I needed them. And I met with all of the 8th grade students briefly, kind of introduce the idea of work-based learning and ask them to dream about what they would, and like to see themselves doing, and explain that no one expects them to know that at age 13, but that it's not too early to think about that, and what, our CTE centers offer, and what high school life is like, and that you get to pick some of your classes, their requirements, and within those you can pick them. I kind of explained all of that to them, and that you can make it personalized, that we would like your educational experience to be personal to you for your interests. And then I spent in the spring, I worked with a group of staff identified 8th grade students who were identified as students who were hardworking but not interested in school. So I called it Future Fridays, and every Friday I had a group. And I took them outside and we did a lot of discussion-based games, activities, kind of on thinking about their life and what that would look like and what skills they may need to be successful in that. So it was a lot of like, I love when I work with my uncles on my uncle's farm, and I'm really good at this. And what makes you feel good about that? It was kind of a dialogue like that. When they entered here as 9th graders, they came to me a lot for, do you think I really need this class? Should I switch to a different class? I'm not sure why, like, I had to find out why they're asking that question, pull in their guidance counselor, but I think they wouldn't have, without having had that conversation and a safe person here that they recognized to go to, that they were able to be themselves with and talk about their vulnerabilities and their interests. That's really hard for 13-year-olds to do, especially in a group setting of peers. I don't know if they would have engaged in that, so they maybe would have just said, I want out of the class, stop going to class, whatever it may be. So we could switch gears or just encourage them, and they jumped on through. So I found that to be helpful for them. So I met with the middle school, asking if I could do what I did with 8th graders with 7th and 8th this year separately. And they actually have a time that's back to back. So I'll be with 7th like 10 to 10:30 and 8th 10:30 to 11 for a week straight, and I'll hit all of them. There are 5 groups each. Spring, I will do another, what we call Future Fridays or whatever we call it, work-based Wednesdays, I don't know. Another 8th grade group. Does that answer?
Yes, very well. Can I follow that up, Jason? And that's this. I think that you have pretty good support around this table, the work that you're doing. And it occurs to me that if you continue to be successful in the work that you're doing, Heather, you might not actually be able to cover all of the need which will develop. And I'm asking the question from the standpoint that boards right now are engaged in the budget process. And I think it would be possibly helpful, at least to this board, maybe to Rockingham board too, or there may be other funding vehicles available, but so that we can plan for expansion of your program. So this maybe not, it's maybe one of those questions you want to come back on, but I do think that, we should have, some sense of what the carry is going to be to continue to develop a work-based learning program.
I think that's a great thought.
That's a future ask.
Yes, a great thought and a question, and I will ponder on that. That's exciting to even think about. And I will keep that in mind as I'm working with students. Each time I engage in this process with a student or with a group, it becomes a little, we all get a little bit better at it, right? My communication with staff is a little easier this year, all of that. Everyone kind of knows what I'm talking about. The parents seem a little more knowledgeable when I call and say, do you have any idea that your student would like to go to Springfield Hospital, or whatever. So the time is increasing for that, but I certainly see your point that working with our younger students, although I don't intend that to be as intense, for lack of a better word, as it is here with our students, as involved, I guess would be a better word. But yeah, I will keep that in my mind as I'm continuing along this career.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Mike?
It's great to see it. Sounds like the program's going wonderful. You started to describe this under the flexible pathways umbrella, and I just want to make sure I understand how this is working through the system, if you will. Are the students that you're working with, are they on personalized learning plans, or are they not? That formal of a ed plan for them in this process?
Meaning, like, they work directly with me?
Yeah, the ones that you said, roughly 30 some
Yeah.
students. Are
Yeah.
these students with personalized learning plans, or?
All of our students have a personalized learning plan. I don't know that I'm written into all of them. Kelly and I have had some in-depth conversations about that, so that I think yes, we'll get the answer soon.
Okay.
I don't know that changes anything or adds anything.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
understand the structure, to be
Yeah.
candid with you. And the second question I have is there any cap on the number of credits that they can earn towards their graduation requirements based upon this program? And you said at this point in time, it's strictly electives that they are replacing?
Yes, so far this year, last year we did have some students who, worked with like the head of the department for science credits. They were students who were like, when I would go, because I follow up periodically and I do like on-site visits and all of that. Not that I don't trust any of our students or their supervisors, but I also like to see so when I'm describing it to a student, that's helpful. Two birds with one seed, right? If I can see it in action and follow up with a student. But when he was talking about like changing the gases and the engines and the this and the that trucks, I was like, you are doing science all day, so much science.
Yeah.
And so that student in particular received a science credit. I think just a half a credit was all he needed. So that particular student, I think, had 5 credits. He worked a lot. He was a senior. And he really should have, in my opinion, earned 5 science credits, but he only needed the half of the 1. So students, most of them are earning elective credits. It is a hardship, I think, to ask the department heads to oversee in that manner for that many students. But if a student clearly is engaged in just science or just math, whatever it may be, that might be a circumstance worth asking.
And I know this is a new program, but what would you say is the highest number of credits that have been received by a student? You just mentioned somebody received 5.
Yeah, close to 6, I think 5.
5 or 6 have been,
Yeah,
and this is
5.75.
in the first year of the program,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah,
That's great.
I think last year I had a student with that.
Right.
Yeah, so some of I have a student currently this year. He's met his credit requirements except for electives. And he's really kind of focused on what he'd like to do, and he's working all day.
Yeah.
And so that's what he's doing, and it's outside work, so if it's really inclement weather, then, it's kind of like your world, you kind of get today off, and this is a great opportunity for you to come in and we'll talk about your senior project and all of those things, but that's rare.
Yeah.
But he put himself in a situation where he just had elective credits. I find that the students I work with the most are students who need the elective credits and are the high school's policy about 6 credits in 1 calendar year, 1 academic year to be eligible for extracurriculars. I think I have that right. So if a student is only has 2 classes on their schedule because they really don't need any more, but they want to play sports, they'll come in and we're like, this is a great time to explore your interests. And I think it's so great that we have that for our students, because I had some students like, I've met most of I only need a few classes. I'm just going to work all day. And it's like, well, but you need the credits. So we're going to do this through work-based learning. And his first time sheet was like the 34th, the 35th, the 36th on his, on his week. And I was like, wow. So that is a skill, turning in a timesheet, especially in the field that he's going into. He will most likely have a timesheet, maybe a punch card, and turn that into someone. And then the communication, he struggles a little there. So I'm thankful that we have these requirements for our students, that we're not like, right, go out into the world, that we still kind of we let them go out into the world and explore, but we still kind of do it in a way that's, you know, preparing them a little bit better for that, even when they don't think they need it. So that's, I've had a few cases like that, and now I'm like, look at this timesheet, got all the dates right, look at that, you know. I have a couple who turn them into military time. But that's been really great to already see the difference in our students, and I don't know what it would be like for them out in the real world if they handed in a timesheet that was a 34, 35, 36, I don't know, right? But because their supervisor works with the school, we all kind of have the little, we're sending them out gently.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Do any of these work-based learning programs work with students that are interested in careers that would require college or
Definitely.
certificates after? Yeah.
Yeah,
so it's not
definitely.
just
I
like
have one
direct
working in a
to-
law firm right now.
Yeah.
You know, he's there for 2.5 hours a day every morning, and then comes in for third and fourth block. I have the new, like, hope no one wants to change careers because these kids are ahead of you. The new hot thing is radiology tech and radiologist. So they're all headed that direction.
Mhm.
But that's, radiology is more than 8 years. So, and our
Yeah.
connections, what's that? Yes. Yeah, and a student who wants to be a political science, head to law school, all of that. So it's a really fun range of
Yeah.
students, and the same thing, like they should still have a job. It's really supporting the students who want to enter the trades in our workforce, also those who want to go on. I feel like especially those students, because with 2 students in college right now, I know what those tuition payments are.
Yeah,
Yes,
commitment.
I am
Yeah.
not in the Bahamas every year, like we're making those payments. So for those students, especially, it's important for them to check it out and have those conversations. And that's where one of my goals is more informational interviews. I'd love to have students just engaging in that quick conversation and then seeing if they'd like to do a job shadow. Yeah. And another highlight Mike brought up, I had a student who Walter Wallace from the Historical Society called and was just looking like for some community service work from the students over the summer. And it's kind of a hard sell to our students, like manual labor over the summer. And it was 2 months out from where I'd be talking to them. And then I was like, oh, we have this student is going to be a senior and I know his interest, and this sounds right up his alley. So I approached him, we met, decided he might turn this into a senior project, do the community service part, we'll see. He ended up they did a whole restoration at the Rockingham Meeting House, specifically the cemetery. He found that he had relatives who were there that he didn't realize on one side of his family, and he did all the cleaning on their gravestones, and then did his own research and worked with the folks here from all over the country. Worked with them, did a little more research, and realized also on the other side of his family, on mom's side, it was the same thing. So he's going back on his own time, and this is now like a passion of his, and it is his senior project, like, you know, ramped way up there. So even these experiences, sometimes it's not always credit bearing or whatnot, but it just makes their education here and our requirements meaningful and personalized to them. So like this whole new world of him, like, I never knew this really was an interest of mine. And I just like knew the classes he always talks about when I see him in the hallway. That was it. You know, it wasn't like I had this deep connection with him, but so opportunities like that happen every day, and it's so cool.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, I think, piggybacking on Jamie is, you know, this is in the early stages. Do these potentially lead to maybe summer jobs for some of these students and or career opportunities when they graduate from high school?
Totally. I told you I could talk all day. I have my success
I gave
stories
you
page
the
right here.
platform.
Success stories. So yeah, we had a student last year who had a job, not with work-based learning, and his hours were cut, it wasn't working, and then he came in really just looking for a job. Like not for credits or anything, just, can you help me find a job? And so we talked a lot about his interests, and his interests were, he wasn't able to do them because of his age. He wanted to drive larger trucks. He didn't really know why, but he wasn't 18. He can't do that. He needs CDL, all those things. Let's go check out that school. So anyways, long story short, he is now fully employed where he did an internship, and he just started riding along with the company. And then they helped pay for him to get his CDL. I got a message from him last week sent me an email follow-up, which was a huge pay increase for him. He's still limited with intra and interstate and all these things I'm learning. But they were paying him, then it was another pay increase when he graduated, and then again with each class, and it's like, he never dreamed that he would be the successful 18. And it's so cool, his mom works locally in town. I bumped into her and she showed me the website, he's on their website, and she was all tearing up, just, the pride that they had. And there's been a few scenarios like that where I sent a student who wanted to be a large vet tech, not large animal vet, but a large animal vet tech, which is pretty specific. And I was like, let's try Vermont Wagyu. You're female, it's a female-owned company. They've got a lot of large animals, and she's working there now. Like all summer, worked there. And she intends to stay there and go to community college for their classes. Yeah. So.
And then the second question was, and I'm sure you've already thought about this, but having some of those students that have graduated and have gone that path to come back and talk to their students.
I have thought about that,
I think
yeah.
that's really
Yeah.
valuable.
I'm not sure exactly when or how, but I have thought about that. Yeah, thanks.
Anybody else? Jeff?
I have one question, which is, do the 18 employers that you're working with, do they provide you with an outline of their training schedule, how they came to that, this would be first for your internships, and what expectation, and on the reverse side of that, what expectations you may have for the students who are going into internships?
Yes, we actually meet, we have a meeting, so students can't go into an internship unless I speak with the future employee, then we all go and I do a site tour, I make sure that it's a safe environment. We review the Vermont child labor laws. This is why last year it took me a little bit longer, because I was learning all of that, and now I have a little better understanding of that. And especially when I have students who they want to work on an excavation crew or work, they want to work in a kitchen, but they can't run the meat slicer, they can't do the commercial, there are lots of things they can't do. So we meet, we go over that, what they can do, what they can't do, when, all of that, and that's the opportunity for the employer to share their expectations, for me to share mine. We agree on what will work best, like the timesheet example. If they have their own timesheet, I have some that's like an app, they just take a screenshot of it and email it to me. They don't have to then duplicate it with mine. So it's individual within each internship also. Yeah, that's a good question. And also, I never send a student on a full internship until that company is added under the Northeast insurance. So they go with that. There's quite a few steps. That's why I said we have 4 or 5 in the work still. All of those pieces need to line up before I send them on.
And the reason why I ask that, of course, is because it's important that the students are looking at their passions and seeing whether this is going to work or not.
Yes.
But also in the long run, an internship provides them with the skills to be an employee for anybody.
Exactly.
And that's important,
Yes.
important base foundation that they need.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody? Yeah, so,
I was delighted to hear your lawyer one, because I'm glad, so glad to hear you getting back into this so much. When my daughter was here in the 1990s, she did a veterinary internship in the community of Arda in Buckingham, and I'm positive that along, she did double major in college too, but but I'm positive that experience here in high school was what got her into the class at Kansas State. She was the youngest one there, and everybody else had 1 or 2 years experience in there. So hearing you do all of this is wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. It's just like our students who are in the tech, they leave here with so many credentials that other 18-year-olds don't have upon graduating. This is just one more layer to put in there and add on, and it really puts them a little step ahead. And all of it, the students are like, well, I don't need the credits. I'm like, if nothing else, going to check it out and having that interview is going to help you when you interview for scholarships, for a different summer job, for all, X, Y, and Z all the way through. So each little part just helps prepare them because they think they're so ready.
Anybody else? Well, Heather, thank you, and thank you for what you do, and really, I really appreciate it.
Thanks for all the support. I appreciate it. Anyone else need swag?
And that's the flag, yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
So, Kelly, you're up next, fire away. Thanks.
All right, looks like, starting with PCBs. Okay.
Whatever your pleasure.
All right, just got to provide a quick update. So, at the moment, we're still scheduled to have our confirmatory air sampling redone on the 16th and 17th of October. The primary focus of that on the D wing is just to assess, our kind of interim plan, which was to recalibrate the machines in this side of the building. Given that our prior samples have come down so much, we wanted to test out whether recalibrating those down to about 50% during school hours, whether that would still have an actual, be able to maintain that, hopefully even decrease things further. But this test will assess whether that's still an okay thing to proceed with and whether we can even turn those down even more. We'll see. The 16th, 17th will also look at that secondary air sampling for the C wing. Again, those units were deployed later, so that secondary air sampling has not happened over there yet. So this test will look at how well those filters are impacting things over there. The test will also be looking at the gym and auditorium in an even more robust way. So in the last sampling, I think they only put two units, one in the gym, one in the auditorium. This time they're going to look to place samples in all the same areas as the first testing. So to include the stage, the locker rooms, right? And so the hope there being that the numbers will continue to show that that space is at or below the school action level. And if that's true, then I believe we'll have support for reopening spaces. So the one hiccup that I'm urging just some caution about is we had a couple building related issues unrelated to PCBs last week. One of the things that happened required us to take the air handler above the auditorium offline. And anytime we make any modification, right, to our air handling in particular, there's a process we need to follow in terms of notification, and that could be an impact on our ability to sample as planned. We're still waiting to get confirmation back. We had notified BHB and the state and the lawyers and Monsanto, right, that this had happened. We were able to bring that air handler back online Tuesday, so yesterday. So we still believe we're able to proceed as planned on the 16th or 17th, but it's possible that our consultants will say that we need to push that back because we had to take that offline. We just don't know yet. So we will pass along a notification to Jason once that's confirmed. But that I just want to preview that possibility exists, but we're hopeful we're still on par for next week. Again, I believe we still have the support with that rush sampling that we had last time. With the lab, so we're hoping for a fairly quick turnaround in line with what we saw last time. So I remain hopeful that we'll continue to get good news there. We still, with the DEC blessing and with their financial support, did proceed with procuring the 4 modular units that we have planned to have delivered. They're here, they're out back. They're great. If you want to take a look at them at some point, let me know. So again, those are intended to house transportation, some of the student support services teams, and to serve as 2 winterized locker rooms for athletics and PE if we are still to meet them. The tents are still scheduled to start coming to be all down by the 25th. That was the current contract, had us through the 25th. I think we're able to start bringing 2 or 3 offline over the next week or so. In that our use demand for those spaces is way down, given that the air is better in the side of the building. We will keep gym and those 2 locker rooms operational outside, given that we had to push back our testing. So I did, again, have no reason to believe this will be necessary, but in the interest of trying to stay ahead of things, with Willis Scott, the rental company that we sourced the modulars through, was last on site. We did walk the property just to assess their ability to provide a more robust modular plan if we were to ever need it as part of this mitigation or long-term remediation work. They were very, very helpful. I'm expecting a quote on what we discussed any day now to get a better sense of what that would involve. But they're pretty comprehensive. I have to say I was pleasantly surprised. They do feel we should readily be able to accommodate what they call 2 10 classroom units, kind of out back where the tents currently are. Each of those classrooms would be on par with the size of the current tent. So basically it would be a 10, 20 by 30 classroom, so not insignificant. Each one has a bathroom, there's additional bathrooms within the unit, covered hallways, so it's kind of self-contained 10-unit pod. So it'd be 2 of those and probably another eight room or 8 classroom pod as well. I think the caveat there is unlike our existing modulars or the tents, if we were to bring those on site for long-term use, we're looking at some pretty significant infrastructure, right, in terms of plumbing, electric, right, things of that nature. When I asked the consultant about timelines, so I said, gosh forbid, I call you on the 23rd of October and say, our testing results are terrible, right? How long until we're fully operational? He felt like they could get the units on site within a month and have the plumbing and all related things done to launch after the new year. So right after January 2nd. Obviously there's a lot of curveballs that could come along, but I was relieved to kind of get that. Not only do they have the capacity to meet that demand if requested, but that we could pivot fairly quickly if that's what the need was. Again, I'm not clear on the expense yet. I understand that's a huge variable, but that quote is also in process. So I'll pause there on the PCB, please, if anyone has questions. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so question regarding the gym and the auditorium. My understanding is we did not put any of the carbon filter units in there.
Correct.
Can you update us on why the change of a really high number to under action level?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that it's a working hypothesis, right? But I think what they're finding as they continue to test various schools is that weather is a variable, right? And so I think how that played out for us, right, is we had done the preliminary testing, I think late May or early June, right? And as we recall, those got mishandled, right? The tests were still run, and I think it's important to remember that they still ran those tests. They still indicated that there was an issue in our building. They just couldn't source how bad the issue, they couldn't tie the number to a room, which was what prompted the secondary tests in July. I remember being here that week of July, like, especially that section of the building, right, where the gym and auditorium are housed, like, we literally had paper melting to the bulletin boards, like, it was super, super hot, right? And so the working hypothesis here is if, for example, the PCBs are in the roof deck paint, right, it's got a low R value, we're looking at upgrading that, sun bakes paint goes into humid air filtration units are already somewhat compromised, frankly, at 54%, however they're operating, right? It was kind of perfect storm, so to speak, right? So you are correct in noting that there are no filters in there. There is no mitigation happening in those spaces at the moment. It's so that the numbers coming down could simply be due to weather, right? The humidity is decreased, right?
If I may add, one of the other working hypotheses is that in July, there wasn't a lot of activity in the building either. So you don't have a lot of doors opening and closing, so fresh air coming into the building wasn't happening. So that's one of the other working hypotheses.
And the understanding is we're still moving forward with the roof and the HVAC units.
So we were very encouraged with our meeting when we were given some preliminary, start moving forward again with that. So we have begun that work again, getting bids and working on it. We pivoted where Steve was thinking of doing the roof before the HVAC with the whole concern is, one of the things is by getting the HVAC up and running online, that should help to remediate the PCBs. So we are moving ahead. Just had a meeting earlier this week where we're talking, trying to get things going in the next couple of months of doing things. So, and a lot of that work is just replacing units on the rooftop. That's why we're able to go ahead and start that work. It's not actually working like with ductwork and taking ductwork out. I just want to be clear, like it's like working on rooftop units and removing and replacing.
But it's all of the units. Is that accurate?
It's not 100% of units, but some of them were just installed recently.
Okay.
But the majority of it is the gym and the auditorium area, and then into this area.
Any other questions?
Yeah, are the Iowa students still planning on coming October 20th?
Yes.
And do the gym.
Yep.
Work
Yes.
testing?
Yes, and so that testing again is gonna be really helpful to the source investigation work, which still needs to be done, right? We need to clear this next hurdle, kind of open that next gate, so to speak, but that is still the plan for the DEC and the state is to have them come. Again, that's no cost to us, and talking to the consultants, they felt like having that kind of parallel work would be really helpful to them with that source investigation piece, so that's still the plan.
One last question, the modulars that we have and then the future opportunity, I guess you could say, is that still through state funding?
So clarify future opportunity.
Like if we ended up, if we have to be offline in certain areas and we have that modulars and plumbing and all that, is that gonna be
The
through the
reimbursement
state,
piece.
the reimbursement?
Okay, so, let me unpack that a little bit.
Okay,
So every time we go through this, we have to get DEC approval. So right now, everything we have on site is approved. The only thing with all of these under PCBs that is not approved, that is not reimbursable, is the lawyer that you hire. That is a cost that you are absorbing. The state just yesterday opened up the grant management system for reimbursement, so we're already beginning to go through the process so we can get reimbursed for all that stuff. If we had to go through that future scenario that Kelly was talking about, we'd have to have some serious discussions, because we're into the preliminary numbers. We have not gotten a quote back, so I want to be very clear. But just doing some real quick math, we're in the millions of dollars. We do not have the liquid asset to be able to front that.
upfront.
Which is what you have to do with any reimbursement. And so if we were in that kind of a scenario, I'm not 100% sure how we would approach it.
Thank you.
Kelly, were you able to ask your clarifying questions of Larry Slayson on where he stood with PCBs? You brought up at the last meeting that you thought he had stated that he had no intention of following through the long-term remediation. Were you able to talk to him and get him to clarify? Okay.
And I think it's important in my mind, like, why that was so concerning is because it was a we, it wasn't an I, he wasn't speaking for himself,
Yeah.
right? So, I think that remains an open question and point of concern for me. Okay. Yeah.
Kelly, a question. So as of right now, the action level is below what it needs to be, so technically, everything could basically open. We just need their next test.
In the D wing, everything in this section of the building is under the school action level, except for 2 spaces in the social studies wing. 1 space is right at 100, which is right at that action level. 1 space is at 110, so just barely over. So we're hopeful that this next round of testing will bring this side under. Again, we don't have the secondary samples for the C wing yet. That was, not as bad as portions of the D wing, but there were still some pockets that I would say were pretty close to that 300 threshold. So we don't have any indication yet that it's working over there. So we still have pockets in the building that are at that school action level.
And the gym and the auditorium right now are eligible to open, right?
Assuming the secondary test, I think that's what I took away from that meeting, is if it comes back and it's still at the school action level or below, that we would have support in reopening those spaces. There may be some additional modifications, right? Like again, like the building, right? Reopening school action level spaces, there were a continuum of risk that had to be explored, and, so something similar might happen with those spaces, but I'm hopeful we can figure this out and hopefully we can figure that out. So,
Me too. Any other questions on this subject?
Just one more. So the carbon filters, are those, do we foresee those continuing at least through the end of this year until we get into, you're smiling with it? So we get into mitigation,
remediation.
because that's also going to help when we get the HVAC and see if one's outworking the other.
So regardless of what happens in the future with the legislature and all that stuff, we have PCBs in our building.
Right.
We have to, under the current law, remove all PCBs, or if we encapsulate, we have to continue to test to ensure that they're below school action levels. Until we finish remediation, these carbon units will be in our building.
So they're not gonna go to another school and we're gonna lose them. We have them until this gets solved.
Until it gets signed off by DEC that we have met everything to ensure. Yes.
Did we get any, carbon filtration filters for the HVAC? At one of the meetings we had, we were getting the carbon filtration units. And then there was mention of some filters for the HVAC system.
I don't believe, if memory serves me, that those were carbon specific filters for the HVAC. I think the recommendation was just made to maintain the current system.
Replace.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
That was my.
That's why I was looking at your question. I don't recall
Oh, okay.
the carbon filters developed.
Good question. Why do they have carbon? I don't know. I don't know.
Can I answer that before you go down?
Done.
They do, they have, so there's this company that has, ion,
What I would say is.
air cleaner things that they put on all the HVAC and it effectively cleans the air before it goes back out. I know we talked about it a couple years ago on the buildings and grounds, it's never really like ordered on or whatever, but they're not cheap, so. Go ahead, Don.
My question is, how frequently do those filters have to be replaced in units?
In the units?
Yeah. Like every 3 months,
Every 6 to 7 months, and the mitigation specialist said that they would do that as part of their site work.
Yeah, because they have to be done, especially otherwise you're putting more PCBs back in the air.
That was my takeaway,
Remove
but I
it, Yeah,
can confirm, yeah,
that's what I figured. Because I know with everything else, anything that has a filter has to replace at some point.
yeah.
So 6 to 8 months.
And it may be that if we get to the point, right now, there's, like, when they're turned up all the way, you're doing 6 air exchanges per hour. And when you turn them down, you're exchanging the air less, you're pulling less in. So at 6 air exchanges per hour, those filters are good for X amount of months, right?
And if you reduce it,
At 50, they might
extend it
be,
a little bit.
yeah.
I get it.
Thank you. All right, moving on, what's next?
Sure, so I didn't see the principal's report on here, so I won't do a deep dive into it. I would just add, you know, always after I hit send, I'm always like, oh, I wish I would have added, so I will just throw out 3 more quick bullet points and then transition to the flexible pathways handout. So in terms of the principal's report, I think the 3 things I just wanted to quickly note, which I think are really, really positive. One is part of our district building-based professional development this year. We are working with the Greater Schools Partnership, specifically with a trainer, an educator by the name of Erica Wallstrom. Her expertise, she actually was recently hired through the state to do some consulting work around the state and offering a lot of targeted workshops on proficiencies, right, on fortune of graduate. So a lot of these pieces that are coming up in these conversations at the board level, but also in the building. She really is, I think, one of the leaders in the state who's doing this work and supporting other buildings. And we're really fortunate to have her as our district kind of trainer. She's working in grades 7 through 12. And so that kicked off yesterday as part of our district PD work. As part of that contract with her, we do have her coming to work with the departments in the building as part of that ongoing professional development, really to support the application of project-based learning in particular. So I think folks have different levels of comfort and experience with project-based learning, inquiry-based learning. And again, Erica Ms. Wallstrom really is one of the leading experts in this, and we're really lucky to have her. And I'm excited just about how that PD structure is unfolding. So I just wanted to name that. We have some really great student leadership opportunities coming up in lots of different domains for lots of different students. One of the things we have in mid-November, so I know there was I think through Heather in the past, the Getting to Why, right? So that student-led group that really looked at data, right? Data specifically from our YRBS. So that's one of the climate surveys we had introduced or reintroduced at a prior meeting. We've got the health committee or the wellness committee in the district was able to secure a grant to fund this at the middle and high school level. So we have a trainer coming down from Getting to Why to train a core cohort of I think 12 to 15 student leaders across both buildings, who will then go on and recruit additional students from all walks of life. And again, the intent there is really to have broad representation from the community, the student community, to look at what some of that data is saying and to partner with everyone, including the board, in making a plan to address moving forward. So I think that's really exciting and a really necessary thing in our community. The other thing is Mark Gibo and I next Tuesday are taking a group of student leaders, again, from all different walks of life in the community, to Landmark to visit our centers for equity and inclusion. Those are student-led spaces and really important leadership opportunities that exist in that community that are really meant to center and elevate multiply minoritized voices in community. And it's been a smashing success, I would say, at Landmark, both in terms of student retention, but also student leadership opportunities and impacting climate in a really positive way. So our hopes is to kind of create some cross-building, peer-to-peer-ish, right? These are 18, 19, 20-year-olds, right? So slightly older, but still relatable, right? And exploring leadership opportunities through that lens. The other thing is I know Connor's gearing up for an athletic specific leadership retreat. So again, we're kind of pulling from different pockets of the community. So just wanted to center that. And the other thing I wanted to name, because I know this has come up as well, is that middle school, high school collaboration. As part of this district level PD work that's been happening, again, that started yesterday, there's going to be a lot more intentional space held for team department meetings. So yesterday I facilitated a math department meeting, and that was from grades 7 through 12, right? And so in yesterday's meeting, and this what I'm going to talk about mirrored what happened in a lot of the other departments. It was a similar protocol that we used to guide the conversation. And it was really intended to get folks talking and meeting one another and kind of surfacing topics of interest, shared topics of interest to include how can folks better support that transition in mathematics between 8th and 9th grade? How can the various teams support homework, right? Homework expectations. So lots of different topics have surfaced, very much at the preliminary stages of that, but I think that's a win long term. So just to add that. So I don't know if there's any questions on what I wrote.
Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I have some requests for future principal reports. I'd like to see the attendance, like the grade level attendance. And, you know, maybe some sports and bands, theater recognition, you know, how they're doing, how they've been doing, what they have coming up, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And something else. Oh, staff absences with the student absences, just included in your report.
So can you clarify more on that?
Well, the past principal gave us attendance, you know, 9th grade was missing this amount of kids in October and 10th, and how many staff were absent in the month of October.
So look, if I were to look at a prior report, the carbon copy was there.
Should be.
Anybody else? All right, thank you, Bill. Bill?
The last piece is just the flexible pathways summary. So this was put together by the school counseling team. So I'm not going to read verbatim. I trust, certainly I'll answer any questions that I can and relay those back to the team. I think a couple of things I would just highlight. One pertains to dual enrollment. So as is noted here, we've got 3 different dual enrollment opportunities. I think that is an ongoing topic of conversation that started over the summer and continues today is how can we expand those we call those concurrent dual enrollment opportunities. So teachers in the building partnering with CCB and other community colleges, for example, to essentially teach their current course with some tweaks, right? Which would then allow students enrolling in that course to get that dual enrollment credit, right? So at the moment, this is specific to math and ELA, but we do have the opportunity to expand that, which I think would be really important. I think one of the questions we're trying to figure out is how to support that or incentivize that, right? Because there is an added time demand for teachers to take on this consideration. It's not monumental. I know in one of my conversations with CCB, I was really trying to ask them, okay, in the 9 schools you partner with, like, how are some of the other schools acknowledging this added work demand for teachers? Just again, in the hopes that we get a benchmark and can consider that moving forward. Again, all of our students are eligible for 2 vouchers, right? My understanding is that specific to this building, students in the tech program are also eligible for 2 additional classes. And speaking to Scott Farr over the summer, I also understand that, you know, some of the students there can earn up to 18 credits. And when I asked, well, are families or students responsible for the financial of that? And he said, no, like through Perkins grants and other pieces like that, they weren't able to get it. So students are walking away fully funded 18 credits, right? So I think I'm just naming that because I think that's something personally we can and should be aspiring to, but you know, there's some things we need to figure out. So that's I think important. The early college program, just highlighting, so we've got 2 students who are currently pursuing that. So again, doing a full year of college currently. I actually just heard from the student who's doing the BFUHS program earlier this week, who's getting ready to loving their program, loving the program, and is getting ready to apply to BU. So she's very excited to take that next step and is really invested in the decision that they made, as hard as it was to kind of leave and miss out on senior year. They're thrilled about the support and opportunities. So the other thing I'd note, just kind of flipping over, is that online virtual learning. So in the past, we've had teachers in the building who have co-taught through the BTVLC. So either they've taught an existing class in the building in partnership with BTVLC or taught on their own time, right? Courses through BTVLC, but through that relationship, anytime we had a teacher working with them, the building, the community was able to secure a certain amount of free seats in their program. We do not currently have any teachers who are doing that model, and therefore any of our enrollment in BTVLC has a cost associated with it, right? And so that's another thing we're trying to get a better sense of, is what are the time demands, the added time demands, right, to doing that, and how can we support that, again, in the interest of not only supporting more a richer portfolio of courses for our students, but also, yeah. Good question.
If I can add,
Yeah.
So typically how that works is that, let's say a teacher teaches on a block schedule, 3 courses, 3 of the 4 blocks, right? They have a little prep block. So one of their 3 assignments, or one of their 6 assignments over the whole course of the year, is a BTVLC course. So they're only teaching 2 in-person courses and 1 online. That opens up and gives us free seats. When we had a teacher leave here, you go to another school, last year, that teacher was that teacher, and then there's a whole, like, it's not like, oh, I'll teach an online class. It's a lot of prep to learn how to do that and become that type of a teacher. And so it's having that discussion if someone's interested in it, getting them the PD so that they can get off the clock.
I'm just naming that that's an ongoing conversation that relates to this. The only other thing I know, and Heather alluded to it in her presentation, right? is really working on how do we strengthen investment in the PLP process overall, right? And certainly that is a pathway, an important pathway to everything that's noted here. And so Heather has agreed to kind of take on PLP coordination for the year, which I'm thrilled about. So Mark and I will kind of do some background support to her with some of the logistics and around that. But we're really excited about that. And it's one of the things we're thinking long-term that we've seen other schools have success with is, you know, a lot of folks have the PLP process be a credit-bearing opportunity, right? So I'm not talking a full credit necessarily, but that 0.25 a year all the way up to and including senior project, right? There is that question of how do we provide a stronger level of buy-in from students in particular into this important process and the opportunities within it. So that's also on the table for ongoing.
How many students do you have on PLPs at this point in time? Understand you said Heather's going to take over that responsibility.
Yeah.
Does every single student have one of those?
So
or-
every single student, you know, I'm not counting the freshmen,
Yeah.
we're just starting that process with Heather, right? So every single student in the building, there was time allocated during each month, probably every 3 weeks on average, to with support engage in that PLP process
Right.
over the last couple of years. So last year, Matt Heister, science department coordinator, did that. So again, there was a lot of some students engaged and like really understood the value and significance of it. Others didn't quite see the why, right, in it, and so we're harder to.
But they had the homework lab if they didn't have it.
Yeah, there was a lot of accountability from that in particular, putting folks in engaged, yeah.
So one other question. Who's the person that's responsible for determining whether it's in the work-based area or in the tech space, the allocation or the application of credits, whether, and in general, I think in your notes, that you said that the credits are focused on replacing electives. But Heather just mentioned a situation where one student was able to get credits for a core curriculum, you know, science. So where's that decision made, and is that part of what you're doing in terms of bringing in this flexible pathways consultant to try to make that a more uniform process, or just how does that work?
In a perfect world, that's supposed to be happening as part of the PLP process. In a lot of other buildings, they actually have a dedicated flexible pathways coordinator, right? Someone who work kind of shoulder to shoulder with school counseling, with the work-based learning coordinator, right? And their job in part is to kind of crosswalk the proficiencies between all these experiences and what we expect, right? So it's less wrapped up in credits and more like whipping it, like distilling it down to its core. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a tremendous amount of time, right? So at the moment, there's, you know, Heather does a little bit, school counseling really shoulders the bulk of it. But that is, I think, in my opinion, a real significant need moving forward. Like if we're really breathe a lot more life into this, we need someone who has the expertise and the bandwidth, right, to provide that crosswalk ability. So Heather alluded to the fact that department chairs often, right, have that expertise, but they don't currently have the bandwidth, right? And so I think that's an important thing to center in the ongoing conversations around scheduling, right, and the reallocation perhaps is, in my mind, that's one way. If we can find a way to free up a little bit of time and expertise, that is one way in which I'd want to see it reallocated.
Or have your hand up first.
Go ahead, David.
Go ahead, David.
Okay, couple things. First off, the Board of Control for BTVLC is River Valley Technical Center, and as such, I think Mike has had some involvement with it. In order to teach an online class, you need to have the online teaching certificate. And I think it would be interesting to know, not necessarily right this moment, just how many staff members in this building hold the online teaching certificate. And then I think a separate conversation might be whether we want to encourage holders of the certificate to consider teaching an online class. That's something that I think the administration needs to kick around for a while and maybe get back to the board on. I'm also backing up to dual enrollment, and then I'm gonna move forward again. Under the CBA, we provide a certain number of paid UVM continuing education credits for teachers. They're free. And what has been the practice in years past, I think many people around the table are well aware of this, and that is not all teachers utilize all of those available UVM credits, or at least the equivalent of UVM credits in a given year, and therefore a pool is established so that some teachers are able to avail themselves of a larger percentage of that pool than other teachers in a given year may be taking advantage of. I'm guessing that the language here is all 11 and 12 graders have access to dual enrollment vouchers. I presume that those dual enrollment vouchers are coming through the university or state college system. And I would just ask the rhetorical question of whether in fact a pool for those vouchers could be created so that some kids who are unusually ambitious in those areas would be able to avail themselves of it. I think, Kelly, it was you that pointed out that at least at RVTC, we had a couple of kids who I think hit 18 credits that were available to them. You know, you and I went up to the graduation ceremony, Mike. But there's one other thing here I want to get after, and that is this very interesting language which occurs under your 1 to 3rd bullet point under work-based learning, which says there is no system in place to compensate teachers to match proficiencies to specific academic areas, which would enable students to earn academic credit through their work-based learning. And the interesting language here for me is that there is no system in place to compensate teachers. Well, I happen to believe that we need to view that language through the filter of the collective bargaining agreement and come to some sort of general understanding of just how that language may be impacted by the CBA. And I say that in consideration of the 4th bullet point, which states that when students have an interest in taking BFUHS courses, but have schedule conflicts, maybe it's scheduling conflicts, grammar was never my strong suit, they may be able to take the class as an independent study. The teacher is available and willing to do this. And in my, shall we say, simplistic worldview, I can't see a great deal of difference between monitoring a work-based learning credit and an independent study credit. So once again, I think some guidance as to how those two situations relate to the collective bargaining agreement might be very useful, and particularly given the fact that I think there is general support around the board table to encourage flexible pathways. I frankly feel that the language with regards to compensation of teachers for flexible pathways learning creates barrier, and I'm uncertain as to how real that barrier actually is, and I think we need to have a better understanding of that. Thank you, Kelly.
Jane, do you have a question?
I just wanted to add, that parents can also go to their guidance counselor and say, you know, my child did this over the summer, took this course or whatever, and they can evaluate, because I did it with a medical course that one of my kids took, and it satisfied their half credit of help that they needed. So you can lay some of this back on parents and have them advocate a little bit for themselves.
Anybody else? Deb, Priscilla? Kelly, I just wanna say thank you for all you're doing. Again, I think, we wouldn't be in the position we are with the PCBs without your great leadership in the building and outside the building. And I think you're doing outside and inside. So, my charge to you is, keep going. Unfortunately, it's not over.
27 days in.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on, we have, some, committee updates. First one up is norms. So we have to, was hoping to get an update, and then we have to, ratify it, as well, if we wanna. Yeah, so, Jamie, I believe you're the chair, so you have an update for us?
Yeah. So our norms and goals committee met, and we basically just did some planning around, you know, what our thought process is moving forward. And what we decided is we wanted to reach out to all of you and kind of get your feedback on this, that this is what impacts all of us, both as we work together and what we want to accomplish this year. So yes, I reached out to each of you to sort of get your feedback on that. The intention was I would gather that information, put it together in a Likert scale survey, and send that back to you all, so you could rate each of the norms that we've collected and each of the goals. And from there, maybe have a conversation about, okay, these are the ones that we rank the highest. Let's chat about that and decide what we want to do with these moving forward. So, right, we met, we did some planning, and that is where we stand at the moment. And we hope to, I guess, ratify it so that we can actually meet again and continue what we're working on.
Great, so we're up to the ratification. Do we have, can go ahead and make a motion, right?
Yeah, actually, can I vote tonight or can I make motions tonight? I've got to get sworn in, so. Yeah, okay, sorry.
Rob, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we ratify the norms,
We have to say norms and goals.
norms and goals.
From then,
The vote we took last week.
On the
Yeah.
board goals and norms committee, yes.
So that wasn't technically on the agenda for action item, and it was added under adjustments, so I want to go back and try to do it right. Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Why you cannot vote, so David?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Simon?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Priscilla?
Yes.
Deb?
What did I say the last time?
yes,
You didn't say that the last time.
I know I did.
Darcy?
Yeah.
Jane?
yes.
All right. You guys are in. You're in the
Okay,
club.
can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I would love, I think I emailed you all last week. I would love your feedback by, if you could email me any ideas you have for goals for the year or norms by Friday the 13th. Spooky. And then I'll take that information and get it out to you sometime next week. I met with Kate Connor. She gave me some ideas on making a survey for you all, so I'll get that back to you next week. And then hopefully we'll move forward with meeting again.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
What's the percentage that you got back from the board members?
so far?
Yeah.
Thus far, let me do a head count. 1, 2, 3, 4. I guess I've gotten 6 responses.
So better than what parents send in sometimes. Good. All right, congratulations. Okay, next up we have WNESU voting member election. So we at the last meeting, we were going to make some changes, but I believe June has a change of heart, and I have as well. And I believe Mike is going to be staying on that. So what I would like to do is have an alternate. So if somebody can't make it, we still have 3 people, on the, that show up, because it's, getting into winter, stuff happens. So I wanted to, query the board and see how you feel about it, and then see if you guys wanted to hold an election. David?
Okay, well, I don't want to throw cold water on the notion, but there is some history here. And when I was sitting at that end of the table, I thought it was a great idea. But cold water was splashed upon that by board counsel, who indicated that we could not appoint an alternate. And I'm going to make 2 comments here. Number one, is my personal belief that what is not prohibited in statute is allowed. Secondly, I think you do need to consult with counsel and find out if it is specifically prohibited in statute. And if it's not, I believe it would be allowed. However, I took a run at this a couple of times with 2 other superintendents of school who seemed to believe that in fact that was not an available option. I think it's a good idea. But I am telling you that there is some history which suggests that there may be the possibility that we would not be able to do it. I would certainly support it if you can get a green light from the council.
So was it, the name was personal for council with you?
Well, we had it both from Stitzel and Page, and we had it from Pietro Lynn.
So
Heaven help us that when we switched council, the answers didn't get any better, but I think you really should find out if we can do it.
Oh, 2 things. One, who are the current SU representatives of the board?
myself, June, and what?
Mike was, will be happy to do it. Okay, so that's it right now. And 2, with the virtual platform, it really is next to no excuse not to be able to turn up. You know, car breaks down, Zoom. Snowstorm, Zoom. I mean, kid gets sick. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of ways you can use the virtual platform to continue to be there. That should minimize few people on whether you can have alternates on. That should minimize the number of people who can't turn out.
Very good point. Very good point. Priscilla, do you have anything? All right, so maybe we'll just,
Table it.
yeah, we'll table it, I guess. And we'll just, I'll check the people.
Next meeting since he's not sworn in.
All right. That was easy. Mr. Clark, you were the chair of the last budget. Could you give us an update?
Okay, well, 2 things. Number one, big shout out to Tara, who put together 4 pages of budget minutes. And I will caution the board that these are still unapproved minutes. There are a few corrections that I think might be in order. Rob and I had a very brief discussion as to whether the committee performed the Pledge of Allegiance as is suggested by the minutes, or whether the committee recited the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'll get that sorted out at the budget table. So thank you, Carol. Also want to take note that by my quick count, we had approximately 12 people either in the room or in Zoom, and I think that we had participation from almost everyone who was there. And I personally believe that that is helpful when we're doing budget, that in the past, it's always been, you know, very much an open discussion with board members and administration. And occasionally we've had the wise counsel, you can argue that one up or down, but other interested individuals. We tasked administration with a committee update data request, which I think had 9 items on it, and I think we've got 7 of them in hand. Am I correct, Kelly? I think the 2 major ones that we're still looking for would be Jim Vizina's object-based budget, and the other one is what I refer to as the McAuliffe grid. And what, I'll just read it off here. I don't know if everyone has it in front of them or not, but what it says under number 5 is scheduling class details. Please provide the following table. Across the top of the table, periods of the day. Down the left-hand side of the table, teacher's name, class name. The objective of this table is to allow the budget committee to see the student population distributed by individual course and teacher. How many students are physically in each class being taught by each teacher? And we have in years past employed what I refer to as the McAuliffe grid. Beginning at the time when Jim McAuliffe was a member of this board. In some years, we have paid a great deal of attention to it, and in some years, we have paid less attention to it. Nonetheless, it is, I think, useful for the board to understand what the teaching loads and class sizes are, because I think that in many cases those can be very helpful when we're trying to calculate whether we really want to run a class or not. And a great example that Priscilla has suggested is if you run in a AP class for 2 kids, maybe you want to run it every other year where you can get 4 kids in that class and maybe get a little bit more bang for your buck, maybe a little bit more of a useful size class that you can have discussion around topics, which when you have very, very low numbers is really just kind of a dialogue. So that's a budgeting tool we're still looking for. We're looking for Jim Vizina's object-based budget, and I do anticipate that we will be meeting again at the end of October, and I'm going to suggest to administration that there are problems assembling what I continue to refer to as the McAuliffe grid. Would you let us know in advance of the 26th so that we can plan for it accordingly? I'll take questions from the board, not that I will necessarily be able to answer them, Deb, but let's go.
No, the material you were mentioning is not in what you gave us, the class size. Of the other material, there's a lot of other stuff you sent, the email, and I opened them up and reviewed them, they're not here. Which talks about the teachers' salaries and numbers of, and subjects and how many class students and so on and so forth. There was a bunch of that that I reviewed today, but it isn't here.
I think that was the first meeting that you're referring to.
Is the stuff in the budget
This is
meeting?
the second budget meeting. This is something Jim gave us.
Okay.
Deb, if I could respond to you directly, I went into WNESU email earlier today, which is excruciating to me because I have a great deal of difficulty navigating the WNESU server, but it was all there and was available to all board members. The 9 items on the budget request, if you want it, it's there for the taking. The only things that are still works in progress are the aforementioned McAuliffe grid and the object based budget, which I think Jim Vizina will have for us as soon as it becomes available. I will suggest that, making the assumption that, Mike will continue his service, with the budget committee. I believe that it would be, helpful if the budget committee, were to meet even briefly sometime between now and the 26th, so that we can, make sure we're on track with some of the things that we're looking for still, and also to, the budget committee to give, formal instruction to Mike to work with Jim so that, one guy who probably understands finance, certainly better than I do, is in a position, to, give us some guidance and insight, along with Jim, because I just understand very informally, some of it was a little bit inscrutable to you, Mike.
I think Jim answered the questions I had last meeting.
All right, so my concern is that, if there are any questions about being able to, give a coaching presentation of an object-based budget, then those, obstacles, if we want to call them that, are surmounted when we sit down and have budgets. 26, is that the correct date on budget, Kelly? Okay, and I've spoken quite a bit. I just want to say, if board members can make it, you're encouraged to be there. If there are people in Zoom who have an interest, you're encouraged to be there. Darcy, question?
Comment.
Comment? Okay.
Maybe this is something I should come to the budget meeting say, but, I just want to caution on thinking about the AP classes and potential low numbers.
Mhm.
I know budgeting, we have to think about that, but I know my daughter was in an AP class that started out with 10 kids, ended up with 3 by the end, and those 3 students like learned so much and had so much amazing dialogue. I wasn't in the classroom, just from her feedback saying, so I just want to be careful that we really, and I know the budget committee thinks about that, but I'm just, as a parent, I don't wanna
Well,
lose these
let me
opportunities if it's
respond.
1 kid or 25.
Okay,
Like,
let me respond to your concern, because
Okay.
your concern is a valid one, Darcy. And it is important to remember that the budget committee will recommend a budget to the board, that the board, will, ultimately, either accept as presented, or the, board will decide that, changes are necessary in that budget. And I want to go one step further and point out that the, board will recommend a budget to the voters, which unfortunately, in my judgment, now the voters will either vote up or down. We used to do it off the floor, and sometimes that was a very helpful exercise. But my caution to you is this: it's my anticipation that the budget committee will return to the board with a responsible budget, which will be, factually based upon the best information that we have been able to glean from administration, as well as feedback, which comes from anyone who cares to contribute that feedback to the budget committee. When that budget comes to this board has an obligation to scrutinize that budget carefully and determine if, in a majority of the board's judgment, it is, the correct budget to take forward to the voters, and if not, make the necessary changes at the budget, at the board table. And it is my anticipation that we will be bringing you that budget with enough time so that if the board needs to take a couple of sessions to consider the budget, that you will have, enough time to make any necessary modifications or changes to a budget so that you can, you know, in good conscience as a board, we can go to the voters with what we believe is a budget that will meet the, you know, needs of kids, bottom line. That's the bottom line, because, you know, we're here to provide the best education, pardon me for proselytizing. We are here to provide the best education to students consistent with the voters and taxpayers' ability to support that budget. It should be a win-win all the way around. And yes, I hear your concern very clearly, Darcy, and I also, if I may, Jason, just point out, you have a hand from Priscilla.
I was just gonna respond to, what Darcy said, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think they started out with 10, so I think that would run. Policy says 5 minimum in an AP class, 10 in an honors class. That, of course, you know, if they start out with 10, it would run. Just because the students dropped out and threw it away, it's just a way of trying to, you know, put our students and our resources in the right place. Of course, if you end up with a calculus class that you've only got 2 or 3 students at that level, you may end up having to run it, even though the 5 is the minimum. So I think those things have to be taken to account by the administration just to support what Darcy's saying.
Thank you.
I had 2 questions. What time is the next budget meeting?
I believe it's 6 o'clock on a Thursday night. And that's- Is it 3 o'clock, Bob?
Some say 6, some say.
Okay.
So it will be more.
Okay, so
Okay.
just if,
Watch out.
would the chair announce the time, date and venue, just so we can get there and the Zoom, because some people look at this
Yeah, we've
meeting
not got that.
post tonight.
I know that Nicole will warn it when. 26 at 3. 26 at 3.
Okay, and my second question is probably for Andy. Will we have the final K through 12 consulting?
It's a year-long process, so we will not have like that, the work that New Solutions K-12 is doing is to inform us on how to schedule for next year and the future. But that work, they're just now interviewing people right now. So I don't have a timeline for when they're going to be able to present their final findings, but it's in the spring. So the purpose of New Solutions is not to inform budget. It was to inform administration on how to utilize their staffing more effectively to meet the needs of students. Somehow someone decided that those two were a combined thing and they were never intended.
Yeah, so I guess it's a question maybe for Andy, Kelly, or the budget committee, but our buildings and grounds went inside and outside, and we came up with dialogue, and I guess it will potentially come up in a strategic plan of some deficient facilities that we currently have on our, you know, at our school, and I hope that that will be looked at to, as we prepare a budget, that we're fixing those things and we're doing it in a responsible manner. Not all at once, but we're spacing it out, mostly for safety concerns as well. But also, you know, listening to administration and SU in terms of where their portrait of a graduate is going to go, what things do they forecast moving forward in the next 3, 5, 7 years? How do we get there? And then do we need to add stuff to take away from stuff? And so that's just things that I brought this up at budget committee meeting as well. But I think there's a long list of things this board needs to look at so that we are representing our faculty, our administration, our students, but also representing the people that have voted us to this board. And we have to be cognizant of all of that.
Kelly?
I was just gonna respond to that if it's okay. All that feedback that came through as part of the building and grounds tour of the building and the grounds, but also as the faculty are completing their departmental level budgets, right? I'm collecting all of that. I have a draft of like a 5-year capital improvement piece, so it's all in one spot, so I'll bring it to the next committee meeting. As part of that, I am putting out a request to faculty to look at some of the ideas that have been generated. And with the full knowledge that what the consensus may be among the faculty may not be what's funded, right? We have to center things that prioritize safety first and foremost, right? So I appreciate, there may be some hard decisions that need to be made, but I'd still like to gather that feedback from them. So when that document is put forward, or that draft is put forward, there's some thoughts behind that share as well. So that's in process.
Yeah, I believe we have the building and ground meeting coming up before the budget next week, which will be warned also for anybody else to come.
Do we know when that is?
I don't have it right in front of me, but I know it's next week. We asked, we have to tell you what she's available.
It's the 19th. That's great.
That's great.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Here.
Just to follow up on Kelly's comments, one of the specific questions that we asked Jim Messina at the last meeting was how do we go about making it an all-inclusive budget, specifically the capital needs, the building repairs, et cetera. And essentially we can build reserves on the budget for future capital spending. So that's definitely something we want to take into consideration, probably wasn't considered in the past. So that will, and he's said that's very doable, and it essentially just creates another line on the budget. So that'll be something that'll be broken out specifically. And I asked him if there was anything specific that we had to do to qualify such a reserve, and he didn't seem to think that there was any. But I think, it's something we'll have to prioritize and look into. So I think that's very doable. The budget committee will definitely make sure the budget is all inclusive for things like that.
So, that's the goal. So anything else on budget committee, David? We're good?
I think we're good.
All right, moving on, committee appointments. So basically, we already, did 8A under 5A in our appointment. So Mike's been appointed. Mike knows what he has to do next, what his next steps are. So.
Andy, you will have to come back and ratify that after he's sworn in, basically. Just for.
Yeah.
Okay, so at our next meeting, we'll just make sure we get that on there, that it's all
Like
ratified.
the first thing to do.
Yes, so I am going to put Mike back on the committee that he was on. Whatever they were. All right. Next up, 8. So we're on to 8B. Board member conflict.
Wait, did you do?
We did 8A under, we changed that to 5 actually.
Right, no, it's 7D4. Did you have to do any of that? You're all set.
Committee appointments. I
That's
just,
what you just talked
yeah.
about.
all right. 8B, board member conflict of interest. Possible action. Deb? Go ahead. Speak it up.
Well, I have concern that one of the members of our board is in a relationship with someone who's in administration. It causes conflict. It causes conflict because he's also on a committee that is forming norms and goals. And I would like that addressed. I realize that the Teachers Association, Vermont Teachers Department of Education understands conflicts, which is why they ask teachers who have worked in other districts to get, or work for us to get dispensation if they're voted in to board. However, this is different. It's a much more subtle means, but it also makes me wonder which can drive the train. Is it the board driving the train, or is it teacher and administration influence driving the train? I'm just trying to be sure. And I will point out it's Rob. That's what I was advised, and I'm concerned about that conflict as we continue forward in this board as conflict of interest. If there's a drive from administration on the board, it means the board is not making its best decisions being driven by that source. So that's that was it. And I knew this is the beginning of my coming back onto the board, but I didn't say anything about it until now because of the new committee.
So I just wanna, make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So when something comes up, say it's a vote or something like that, where it might be a direct, interest, then it's up to Rob to do something, or how does that work? Cause I
In
got
a
this thing
conflict,
from
in a
the
conflict of
BFUHS.
interest and of course, and I'm not sure how the state looks at conflicts of interest, if anyone benefits in any way, shape or form, even if it's not financially, that they should recuse themselves from motions, actions that we have to take. If they have a conflict, if they have, for instance, negotiations, if you have a teacher partner, or staff partner, then you should recuse yourself from those actions because they influence you financially. I mean, that's a financial influence. But just other types of influence where you feel you are not, you're doing just putting it this way, the bidding of something other than the board's direct interest to provide the best education for students. That's a place where someone will recuse themselves.
So go ahead.
Okay. Board member, this is our policy. It's the ethical and legal duty of all school board members to avoid conflicts of interest as well as the appearance of conflicts of interest. Conflict of interest means a situation where when a board member's private interests, as distinguished from the board member's interest as a member of the general public, would benefit from or be harmed by his or her actions as a member of the board. That means the board member has to have his private interests impossible over what his general would be. There are a lot of conflicts. There is a whole lot of other conflicts on this board too. I went to a webinar last week where it addressed a lot of those conflicts, and one thing, and it was Pietro that was giving it. And one thing he said was, in Vermont, there are a lot of conflicts. It's hard to get those. I can think of others on this board that might be even more conflict than that, but that's up to the member to address his conflict, announce it to the board if he feels there's a conflict. And then he would refrain from the discussion and refrain from the vote. That's what our policy says. When a member's general public interest would be the same as other board members, I guess that's when we certainly don't have to find a member in conflict, and that we could allow for that. I respect what Deb's saying. If there is conflict, it should be addressed. I think we need to be careful and just watch for those conflicts. If they're there, there are ways to address them. There are ways to take care of them so that they aren't impacting our judgment or anything that the board does. I don't think seeing any member here on goals or norms that they're bringing back to the board as a general thing, that's a conflict, because it's coming back to all of us to vote. It's not something that one member is deciding. If one member is serving the committee and they're only going to back certain things, then say he was the only one on there, yes, it could be a conflict, but I think that's a balance. We've got 3 members on there, but 2 that if they don't like it, and they can bring it back here, and if we don't like it, we can vote against it as well. So that particular one, I'm comfortable with. I don't know that the rest of you feel, but that's our policy. It goes into other obligations that are imposed if anybody does want to do that. And if one of you really feels there's a super conflict, you can turn in a written thing signed by a board member or a community member, and we can vote on and do all of that. I hate to have it get to that point. I think we will start doing that. You're 7 people on that. I think we all want to work together.
So thank you, your opinion. So what do we do as a board? Do we, like, every time we go to vote, do we say, hey, does anybody have a conflict? And that person could, he or she could think about it and be like, no, I can't vote this time, or whatever. How would that work?
You know, I think it's the member's responsibility to announce a conflict if there's a conflict, say, you know, I have a conflict, so I'm not gonna participate in this discussion, I'm not gonna participate.
Thank you,
I mean, we have to trust each other.
thank you, that makes sense. First,
So, I mean, if we're bringing up conflict of interest. What if we have children in the school? I mean, that's. I just want us to get through one meeting without Ken pecking at each other for crying out loud.
anything else, first? All right, thank you. Jim?
I think I can speak to Darcy's a little bit about having kids in school. I've had to step back from the table, push my chair in and say, now I'm speaking as a parent and speak during public comments and communication. I think for one, I think having board members with kids in the school is a good thing because I've been around for a long time. I've chaperoned numerous trips. You get these blanket letters from teachers saying, oh, everyone loved the trip. Everyone was so excited. They were so engaged. That's not what we as parents are getting from our kids. So I think that as far as that goes, that's good checks and balance. And I think that it would be irresponsible for the community members to vote people on that some people that don't have kids on it. And the other thing I wanted to point out that Jason and I have been around now I've been around now going on 2 years. Whenever a para issue comes up, Jason refuses himself. He says, I cannot vote on this. My wife's a para. And Pietro did a seminar for the WNESU that specifically had a slide on conflict of interest. And it said, if you as a board member have a conflict of interest, it was in the slide that you should not be involved in the conversation and that you should not vote or and I think Andy sent his slide to all of us. So that's all I wanted to
So
say.
I think, back to what Priscilla said, when it's perception of like monetary gain, that's the big one. I think that, you know, we as, you know, we're kind of like the guardians of like, whatever, Alex, but we just gotta be careful. And I think that we'll all do the right thing. I do. So, and, you know, Darcy, to your point, you know, I have kids in the school and every time I walk in the building, I'm never viewed as a parent. I'm always viewed as board member, even to my friends who maybe are ex-friends now because I'm a board chair. So, you know, that's just how it goes. That's just, you know, there's nothing we can do about it. You know, we're gonna be viewed that way regardless.
If I may,
Sure.
I just wanted to go back to speak to why I did.
Yeah.
The last meeting, I voted no on the committee. I voted no on the committee because of the particular, what I view as conflict with someone who might be providing us as, even as the committee, and we unwary say yes to these things, which provide more shackles. As I said, goals and norms are things that are already provided through our policies, through the state statutes. We already have a lot of things telling us what to do and when to do them. And we also have administration reminding us about things we have to get done. Doing this just seems to put another layer of control over the board. That's my concern. I don't expect anyone to do anything about it. I just want everyone to be aware of it and where it comes from when the committee brings forward their requests or their recommendations. I did not answer you. I believe that the committee should be doing the legwork. That's why committees are formed, to do all the work, not for the board to do the work and provide the work to you. That's why I did not supply you with anything. I believe you have the tools to do that work yourself and to get it done and provide it to the board. That's what committees are called for, to do the work. And that's everything.
Well, I just wanted to speak to Deb's in the board guidelines. It states that we are supposed, as a board, we are supposed to come up with goals and norms every organizational meeting, which is in March.
Which is March.
Which, to my knowledge, the only one that has it is Rockingham Board, and they roll them over. So, oh, Westminster does, okay, so we have, to my knowledge and to Nicole's records, the high school board has never done it as far back as her records go. So that, you brought up statutorily and all that, that's what it says in our guidebook that we are supposed to. So we're just trying to get everything above board and the way we're supposed to operate and go from there.
So I look forward to you guys doing that. Really cool asking specific goals and then to execute them.
Yeah.
Right, I'll say. Okay, moving on. 9, Carnegie credits discussion and policy procedure, no action taken. Deb, I think this was your act.
Well, we brought this up multiple times. And I keep bringing it back to the listening tours and others. There are, all other schools don't have 28 credits at the high schools. I would like to understand why we have to, especially when there are students who do not graduate on time with the rest of their class because they didn't get enough credits to do that. I understand and was an excellent student and got more than credits needed from my school back in when that was, which is not as high as they are now, and went on to college from that. And I don't believe that every student has to have 28 credits to get graduated. Other areas, schools do 26 or 27. And I would like to see if indeed we don't need to have that. Any student can over excel and get more credits, way more credits than required. But do we need to do that? When did we change credits? What was the last credit? What was the last historical changing of the credits? I'm assuming there's a policy for that. It would have been done by the board at some point in the past. I think looking at that, because if I don't want to say that we put in fluff, but there has been speech by some people who have said that that indeed is the case. Mr. DePaul, I believe, is one of them, concerning having to get 28 credits to get to graduation. I would like to understand, I'd like to understand the foundation of that, and I have asked for that probably almost every year. And it has an impact, it would have an impact on budget. We also have had some preliminary conversations, preliminary reporting from K-12, whatever, whether it should or shouldn't be impacting the budget is something that is left to be determined. And I'm done.
Andy Kelly, can I ask, do we have a policy?
So we started researching when the high school transitioned to 28 credits. I've been able to go back to 2014 and not find, I can find that it's referenced that there's 28 credits. As I stated in an earlier meeting, I suspect that some of the movement with 28 credits happened when this school started moving to block scheduling, because under block scheduling, a student potentially can earn more credits. As I also stated at a previous meeting, some of the reasons why some schools may have less credits required is because they may not be on block scheduling, so students can't earn any more than say 24 credits. So they may require 24 credits and they may only be able to earn 24 credits. So it's a lot of unpack. I have queried the entire state. I've gotten 45 out of 62 of our schools have responded. That's 73%. So I think it's a pretty good reflection. Of those 45 schools, 6 of them are 100% proficiency-based graduation requirement. If you start to unpack that, many of them still need the same requirements of courses. They're not saying you have to earn credit, you have to show proficiency in 4 English classes, and here are the standards. Those standards have to be the same as everyone else's. But of the 39, we are the only school that requires 28 credits. So. Excuse me. Six of the high schools throughout the state require 26 credits. 3 of the high schools require 25 credits. 11 high schools require 24 or more credits, up to 25, so some of them are 24 and a quarter, 24 and a half. 10 require 22 plus, and 8 require 20 plus. So,
That's lower than the state minimum.
no, state minimum is 20.
I thought it was fine.
Many of those also, by the way, have then some combination on top of that. So for Champaign Valley, they require 22 credits, but they also require a half credit for completion of exit experience and 2 credits for completion of RISE, which is a 4-year experience. So right there, if you take the 22, they're requiring 24 and a half credits. But you have to unpack it and get into this. Burlington requires 24 credits, but they also require 1 additional credit, which is a 0.25 credit for an end of year study. So over 4 years, kids are doing that, so it's part of their programming. So it's so again, I think the unpacking needs to get back to where, when did the school go to 28 credits? When we get past like 2014, we're now getting into paper and having to do that research and to find it. It takes a lot of time to figure that out. Anecdotally, there's like, oh, well, talk to so-and-so, you know, talk to John Doby, talk to, you know, like, and you start to dig back and I agree, unless I see something on paper, it's just someone's remembrance. And that remembrance, is very different from every person who's involved. I think the other piece is that about 10 years ago, when proficiency-based graduation requirements came on board, schools were supposed to, the state gave guidance around that. And schools got to choose if they wanted to do a hybrid system or move to the proficiency-based graduation program. And so, as I stated, of that 6, I believe 1 of those schools next year is transitioning away from credits to proficiency-based graduation. And there's a lot of flexible pathways involved in a lot of that stuff. Some schools allow students to graduate early. So based on a plan, I did work at a high school in Vermont where I was the person who, as an administrator, if kids wanted to graduate early, they had to submit a plan for why they were graduating early, what were they looking to do. We could deny that plan based on that. There were students who had, much as like Heather spoke about, students who maybe only took part of their class, so they had early release or late arrival. They maybe worked, or maybe they were involved in a work-based program. So there are a lot of ways of flexing it. But the 4-year high school experience is something that I think has been valued for a long time. You know, not every student is ready to move on, you know, when they're 16, 17 years old. The dropout rate in Vermont, or dropout, not rate, or the dropout age is still 16. That is left over to when kids could work. As Heather mentioned, many of our students cannot operate certain machinery at 16. So you can't even operate it for your 18 years old. You can't, you know, do certain jobs. I don't even know. You can't even employ someone to stand there with a stop sign. Right? And so there's a lot of pieces to look at. What is the experience that students are having, and what are we providing for those students? So I think it's a lot of work that the school for years has kind of been there, but I know Kelly's working with her team to really start to look at what does the future look like. And they still need time to work on it. But we are trying to get that information. It's just
this paper, is there anyone historically who could just point you in the right direction and say, this is about to be here to look at the minutes?
So. Where I wanna get to is, like, I don't have like a program of studies going back year after year after year, you know, for many years, because that would start to tell you when that change happened. You then go back to the minutes, so.
I started here in 1991. I believe. And I went,
You're here in 1991?
I was here and I started.
Yeah.
Teaching here in 1991.
Then all that paper.
So I may have something that I could point you in the right direction. And as you said, recollections. I do not remember it being at any time different than 28. Part of the reason I remember that is because my daughter Cheryl graduated in 1997 and my other daughter graduated in 1994. And I know they had to have 28. So Cheryl had to have 28, she graduated with 30, I believe. So there's some of the things that could help you document, and I'll look and see what I have for you. I think back to when CODIS guy was here, and he said the kids need more skills. The only way they're going to get more skills is if they have more coursework, if they are here and do more of those things. I heard Heather tonight said they need skills to do that work out there. We have to support them. They can't do it. So those are other pathways that we can use to help with that. So personally, you can get 32 credits in 4 years if you're taking credits for all 4 blocks.
Thank you. In 1989, there was only 21 credits required to graduate.
Oh, there's Ray. Now you got a good thing.
1990, I wasn't sure. I just know I graduated.
You're not sure. So we know it's 21 credits.
We all
know how old June is now.
That's you know someone from that area, right?
I don't know how, if you're back 2 more years, you know, I'm wrong.
Yeah, and it probably stayed that way for a long time. When my husband graduated, he said it was 18, it fought out.
Okay, moving on again, next up, we have 9 members to I'd like to query the administration or Andy, outcome of investigation regarding member of the public from the last meeting when we had.
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the last meeting, that it was I did not think it was appropriate for myself or any member of my staff to do an investigation as such. Our charge is education. I then reached out to the independent investigators that I've used in the past, who have done investigations. We had a conversation around it. They did not feel that it was appropriate for them to conduct such an investigation, as it is a board-related issue, and their focus is typically on students and education. I then reached out to legal counsel at the advice of the investigator, the independent investigator. Legal counsel did not feel it was appropriate for them to even investigate. They did provide me with a private investigator who's a former law enforcement person, that if the board wishes to contact that person and have that investigation done, that would be something that would be the responsibility of the board. And through all those processes, what was possibly come back is that's a board-related issue that the board should be taking up, and not anyone that is employed in school or with bringing them outside. Okay, but I have that now, that name for the plan.
So in the future, since sounds pretty much like we're on our own, do we just call the cops?
Yep.
Yes, that's exactly.
That's what he said.
So, no, well, no, so if we had again, if there was a board meeting and there were members of the public and it was getting out of control, we would definitely call the law enforcement to respond at that point. If the board felt that we were gonna have a topic that was gonna be discussed that was very contentious and there were rumblings that there might be a reason to have some external support, then the board could, let us know. We would contact and ask local local authorities to come out of it, to come and be present at a board. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, if the board wants a private investigator to do it, and would like me to contact them to do that, we'd be happy to do that. It's not that we're expecting the board to do it themselves. It's not something I would reach out. We would also, just for full transparency, at any of those times, we want to make sure we're charging that cost to the correct line, and it's not coming out of necessarily the high school's operating budget, but it's coming out of the school board's budget. So,
Okay, so there is no action on this stuff. So I think if it's okay with the board, I'd like to think about it and maybe possibly bring it back and you guys can make that actionable. We can ask him to do that if that's all right, or I think we should. Well, thank you for the information. I kind of just thank you. Does that sound? Okay. All right, Deb?
One thing, it does bring up an odd conundrum though, that if a student had an issue like that, there would be some action. And we're bored, and Maggie, you can take care of it through the processes that you have. The board, on the other hand, haven't had to deal with that. However, that stuff does come up, and I have been witness and party to some of that over the years in the municipality, but never for it. And I would have to recuse myself from the vote anyway. The sound turned off, and I was not present. So I'm simply saying it's an odd place because you're a private citizen and a board member, and if a person were to feel attacked, even verbally, what recourse would a board member use? Except for to call the police, but then, as what most likely happens anyway, it disperses and there's no evidence.
So if I may, so in any situation, any private citizen, if they were involved in an altercation, whether it was verbal or physical, has a right to go to law enforcement and to file a complaint with law enforcement, even if it's not at that moment, it can be after the fact. I mean, I've not been involved in, but I mean, I've heard of things where like there was an altercation and one person is left and someone still calls the police and files a report. And then it would be up to law enforcement if they want to follow through with enough evidence, whatnot. So, in this situation, that board member still has that right to do that. It's not but as I said, the same piece, if there was a concern that there was going to be conflict at a future board meeting, then we would look to try and have law enforcement. Again, if we thought that we knew there was a topic that was going to create a large thing, we'd probably be proactive and have someone.
Thank you. All right, moving on, director's comments. David, starting with you.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Just very briefly, with regards to capital funds, might be worthwhile to find out just exactly what we are sitting on for reserve funds. We have a forestry fund. Every so often we have a timber harvest. I believe that this is one example of an existing fund that can be applied to things like possibly HVAC. There have been very specific reserve funds for when we used to run at the time we called a cogen plant, which I guess is going back online now. I believe that these funds can be found in the audit report that RHR Smith has provided for us. And I'm going to suggest that when we're talking about capital needs, it would be useful to know what we already have for capital reserves. I'm quite confident we have them well into 5 figures. That's it.
Thank you, David. Rob?
No comments.
Thank you, Rob. Simon? I'm Jim.
I'm all set, thank you.
Priscilla? Yes, Mike?
I just wanted to say, with Heather's presentation tonight and Kelly's presentation on flexible pathways, I think we can, call the listening sessions. And I'd love to, at some point in time, if you're interested, kind of provide a summary. I distributed some data. I'd kind of like to wrap that one up, put a bow on it, bring it to the board for discussion on a future meeting. That's up to you.
Yeah, please do that. 23rd.
Okay.
Jamie?
I would love your goals and norms. Please participate. Email me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Darcy?
I just want to thank Heather tonight, coming and presenting what she does. I think it offers life-changing opportunities for some of these students and their families. Brings them closer to their families. Make the thing aware maybe what they're interested in. I just think she's doing a great thing. Kelly, thank you for your continued detailed updates on the PCBs. In these 27 days. It's really very helpful. Thank you. And I also am happy to hear about all the collaboration going on between the middle school and the high school. I think that's huge and something that would benefit our students in time. Okay, that's
Thanks, Darcy. Deb?
Nothing.
Deb? Priscilla?
I consider that we're all here to work for the best programs and the outcomes for our students and taxpayers. I really appreciate working with those of you that are really out there and trying as hard as you can, just all of us. The presentation to me from Heather was excellent. The Flex Pathways info presented and will also provides great information. I appreciate it. However, it does not provide all of what my husband and I need to do in order to do the project that we were considering in order to honor our son, Eric. The 20th is when Eric's heart stopped. Therefore, on September 20th, we were only thinking about him and my husband and wanted to work on a way for others to remember him. Eric was the most loving and giving person there is. A better person than most people can ever hope to be. He has taught me volumes over the years. He's better known in all he did than I will ever be. I hope someday to be able to do more with the project we were considering, or to find one even better, because if Eva isn't asking, although it is under Flex Pathways, because I didn't think we were going to have any presentation. But because of his flexible way of having a graduate, we felt that was a good way to maybe set up something that we could give back to the school. He is one of 8 members of my family that graduated from those funds. So I'd like to have a budget that either we were considering or to find one even better suited to recognize for him, which I can't do right now because of the restrictions. Which is too bad. I would pass this out for you to read. This kind of tells you a little bit about I was feeling 6-month mark, which was what September 20th was for me. This is 6-month mark. I changed the name. It was written by me. It was written by someone else who was major symbolism. So I'll start the name, which was what I gave there. What it was. Silence. It always helps. I know it's hard to tell somebody or talk to someone who's lost a child. David has experienced this, he knows very little about the spirit. I'm sure, even though it's been many more years, and the person who wrote this was quite a lot of years. that it is fresh for him, everything.
Yeah. Thank you,
Just thank you for all of you.
thank you, Priscilla.
Thanks for listening.
I have, no direct comments, and, our next meeting will be October 23rd. Hopefully shoot for 6 p.m. again. And, all this meeting adjourned at 8:30.
This meeting was recorded by Falls Area Community Television, located at 1 Hospital Court, Bellows Falls, Vermont. If you would like a copy of the meeting, our phone number is 802-463-1613, or email us at fact810@gmail.com. Falls Area Community TV, keeping government honest.